The 4 dragons in Zelda Tears of the Kingdom provide rare and important materials. This guide covers everything on how to find each dragon, harvest their materials, and what those materials can be used for. As usual, useful timestamps can be found in the video description. Let's begin with recommended gear. A bow is needed to get some of the dragon's various materials, and for Dinraal, the fire dragon, you'll want to make sure that bow is not made of wood. The glide set is extremely useful for closing the distance with a dragon. The 3 pieces of this set are at 3 different sky islands, and while I won't be covering that in this video, I already made a dedicated guide, and I'll leave a link to it near the bottom of this video's description. Cold resistance armor or consumables and perhaps a ruby fuse to your shield will be good for Naydra the frost dragon, and you can find cold resistance gear for sale at the armor shop in Rito Village to the northwest. For Dinraal, you will want at least 2 pieces of the Flamebreaker armor, and this can be purchased at the armor shop in Goron City in northeast Hyrule near Death Mountain. Lastly, while it isn't technically gear, it is recommended that you have all the Skyview towers unlocked, as they are one of the best ways to reach the 4 dragons. Now let's talk about finding and getting to the 4 different dragons, as well as specific tips for each. To start, here's a map of Hyrule with the flight paths for each dragon. These paths are completed over real time spent in-game without the menu or map pulled up, and that time cannot be skipped by sleeping or resting at a campfire. Each of the 3 elemental dragons takes a path that is half above ground and half below it in the depths, and they each take around 30 to 40 minutes to complete a full cycle through that path. Personally, I like to keep my dragon farming exclusively above ground as I find it easier to locate and reach them. Finally, we have the light dragon, which has a huge flight path that nearly encompasses the entire map and takes around 2 hours to complete. The light dragon also stands apart in that it flies exclusively above ground. That brings us to specific strategies for finding each dragon, starting with the light dragon. If you haven't completed the main quest that brings you to Korok Forest, then the light dragon will be flying very high up in the sky, making it difficult to both spot and reach. I have a relatively spoiler-free guide on how to do that quest, which involves getting the Master Sword. I'll leave a link to it near the bottom of this video's description. Once you've done that quest though, the light dragon becomes extremely easy to find, reach, and harvest materials from. It doesn't give off any hazardous conditions like the 3 elemental dragons, and you will likely see it crossing their paths. Speaking of which, let's talk about Farosh the lightning dragon. It begins its above ground path by emerging from the chasm south of the Gerudo Canyon Skyview Tower, and finishes it by diving into the chasm that's west of the Poplar Foothills Skyview Tower. As you approach Farosh, you should remove any metal weapons, shields, or bows. While the temperature is comfortable near Farosh, it does produce lots of lightning, and you'll be targeted by it if you have any metal items out. You can use a metal bow to get the dragon's primary material, just put it away right after to avoid any unwanted strikes. Moving on, we have Naydra the frost dragon. Its above ground path begins at the chasm west of the Mount Lanayru Skyview Tower and ends at the chasm northeast of the Sahasra Slope Skyview Tower. The only thing to worry about with Naydra is cold air. To avoid taking damage, you will either need 2 stacks of cold resistance or 1 stack of cold resistance combined with a ruby fused to a shield. That being said, even if you don't have any cold resistance, the damage over time is fairly low and not of great concern. That is definitely not the case with Dinraal the fire dragon. You'll find it beginning its above ground path at the chasm northeast of Ulri Mountain Skyview Tower, and finishing that path by descending into the chasm southwest of the Thyflow Ruins Skyview Tower. The air near Dinraal will cause severe burning damage if you are not wearing at least 2 pieces of the Flamebreaker armor set. In addition, any wooden weapons, bows, or shields will be burned away in a matter of seconds, so make sure you unequip them before approaching. I learned this the hard way, having my equipped Great Eagle Bow burned away shortly after landing on Dinraal. Fortunately, if this ever happens, you can usually just load back to the previous autosave to undo the mistake. We will next cover general tips that will help with dragon farming, followed by how to get the different materials and what they do. When it comes to locating the 3 elemental dragons, a good strategy is to start at the Skyview Tower near the end of a particular dragon's above ground path. That way, if it is about to go underground, you'll spot it before it does. Follow that by going to the Skyview Tower near the start of the dragon's above ground path, and if the dragon was underground, it will have had more time to emerge while you were first checking the tower near the end of its above ground path. Whenever you do spot a dragon, you can ping its head with your scope to quickly determine the nearest Skyview Tower on your map. You may have noticed that all dragons provide an updraft that also restores stamina when you deploy your glider near them. This means you can expend stamina in whatever way helps you quickly collect the dragon's materials without having to worry about running out. While it's tempting to actively seek out the dragons, I find a more passive approach works fairly well and is much less frustrating. Once you know where each dragon roams, the occasional glance in that direction or panoramic scout when taking off from Skyview Towers will often lead to locating a dragon. In addition, keep an ear out as you will sometimes hear the peaceful melody that plays when a dragon is near before you even see it. One of my favorite places to cook food and sell valuables is the Riverside Stable. This is because fast traveling to the nearby shrine results in a good view of the southern sky, where 3 different dragons, Farosh, Naydra, and the Light Dragon, can all occasionally be seen. And anytime you visit the Break Apart shop in Terrytown, spare a glance north towards Death Mountain, as you might catch Dinraal emerging from the nearby chasm. Last but not least, let's cover how to get the various dragon materials and what they are good for. When a dragon's horns and spikes are glowing, it indicates that one of the 4 major materials can be harvested from it. Pick which material you want and then shoot the appropriate region of the dragon to get it. The material will appear at the point of impact, then fall towards the ground after a few seconds have passed. Let's go through the 4 different materials in ascending order of power and value. Starting with the lowest, a dragon scale, which you can get by shooting anywhere along the length of the dragon's body. Next are the claws or talons. To get these, you'll need to hit one of the dragon's claws. It doesn't have to be the glowing tips, just aim for the palm region and it should work fine. The second to highest tier material are the fangs. Glide in front of the dragon and hit it on the snoot to get one. Again, you don't have to hit the actual teeth, just in that general vicinity is fine. The highest tier material are the horns. You can do it while standing on top of the dragon or while gliding over it. In either case, you'll need to hit the glowing horns on the dragon's head, and you'll want to aim closer to the top of the horns rather than the base to make sure that you get a horn and not a scale. Once you've hit off any of those materials, the glowing crystals on the dragon will fade and become dull, and the dragon will begin recharging over a 10-minute period. At that point, the glow will return to the dragon, indicating that another material is ready to be collected. There is also a 5th and final dragon material that operates independently of the other 4, the shards of the dragon's spikes. These crystals spawn around the spikes along each dragon's back and can be picked up. Picking them up does not cause the dragon to go into a recharge period, and they can be collected while the dragon is in that state. In fact, it's much easier to spot these shards when the dragon is recharging, as they shine brightly and will contrast with the dull crystal spikes they spawn near. In addition, the crystal shards will not all respawn as soon as a dragon recharges. They act more like ore deposits, spawning sporadically. If you have never collected these from a dragon before, there will likely be around 10 or more to gather. But if you return to that dragon within 10 minutes, it's likely that only a few will have respawned, perhaps even less. So what are these different materials good for? Well, for one, they are pretty valuable when sold to a merchant. That being said, you are probably better off using them for something else. First, the Fierce Deity armor, which is my personal favorite, requires materials from the 3 elemental dragons. You will need a scale, claw, fang, and horn from each to fully upgrade the set. Besides that though, the horns are probably what you want to stock up on. They can be used as fuse materials for fairly powerful weapons with special effects. However, my favorite use for them, and it's something that I recently learned, is as an ingredient. They can be added to any meal or elixir recipe to increase the duration to 30 minutes without sacrificing potency. For example, 5 Mighty Bananas makes a meal that provides a max attack up buff for 4 minutes and 10 seconds. Replacing one of those bananas with a dragon horn results in a meal that still provides a max attack up buff, but now for 30 minutes. and dragon horns also work similarly when added to elixirs. Other dragon materials also increase the duration of consumables effects, but not as much. The takeaway is that for long-term farming, you'll mainly be going for dragon horns. The one exception are the dragon spike shards, as those can be gotten in addition to the dragon horns. Going back to the mighty bananas example, replacing one of the 5 bananas with a spike shard will increase the effect duration by 1 minute without reducing potency. But what I really like the dragon spike shards for are arrow fusions. The elemental dragon spike shards provide huge explosions of their respective elements, dealing tons of damage to groups of enemies. Just be careful, as it's easy to get caught up in the blast. And while the light dragon spike shards don't produce any kind of explosion, they do work great for breaking through armor. If you want to see more great guides, you can head over to my channel, and if you're new, consider subscribing. You're helping me feed my cat. Her name's Marshmallow. Have a great day. If you're here today, have a great Sunday and a great week. And as always, thanks for watching.